Well, hello again, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Café. I'm volunteer and producer Rick McNamer. Every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m., host Ray Gary puts together a panel of guests to discuss topics of interest in our community. Listeners can participate by texting questions or comments to 541-661-4098. Again, that's 541-661-4098. Now here's Ray to tell us about today's show.
Today we have a very interesting show that you don't really hear a whole lot about, and our guest is an absolute expert on this, so I'll let him introduce himself and tell you what he's going to talk about.
Alrighty.
Hello, my name is Dave Kollen. I'm a Xerces Society Ambassador, also a master melitologist, and that's a person that studies bees, and Oregon Master Naturalist. The latter I'm not doing too much of, but just as an example, I used to survey for dead birds along the beaches here. But I find working with bees a lot more satisfying. So,
but now wait a minute. We're going to have to hold up here for just a second and hear a little bit about the dead bird survey. What?
Well, there's an organization called COAST, Coastal Observation and Seabird Survey Team, and they look at bird mortality, seabird mortality, mostly along the coast from Oregon all the way, or actually Northern California all the way up into Alaska. And so they've been tracking this data for years, and if we get weird events like, you remember the temperature blob that was off the coast here for a couple of years, well, you see increased mortality in some of the bird species because of that. And so that's what that data is for. But, after I did that 3 years and, picking through dead carcasses and trying to figure out what the heck it was, measuring this and measuring that, I said, I think I'll start doing something else.
Yeah, I guess if it was just the birds and the feathers and the bones, but probably a lot of them are full of maggots and such by the time you get to
the
them.
big birds can be pretty gross. I remember having yellow jackets crawling around inside the skull on one bird I was trying to work on.
Okay, we'll give you a pass on staying with that.
Okay.
And moving on to something.
Moving on, but one real quick thing before you talk about the blob. Isn't the blob, I think we have that going on this year.
I honestly don't know. I just know it's a temperature anomaly on that water out there, and I don't know whether we're in it.
I just saw a little local report out of my old area, Sacramento, the other day, and they were talking about the blob still hanging around the northern Pacific. So hopefully it's not, but anyway. Okay, so continue.
I just want to make a statement. I'm present here in my personal capacity, so anything I say really reflects my personal opinion and not any of the organizations that I volunteer for.
Okay.
Especially if it's controversial.
We say that a lot too, but the organization still gets blamed for everything we say. But
so this time of year, fall's just arrived, and things, if you're looking at pollinators and some of the other insects that we pay attention to or not in our yards, we see things are just kind of slowing down. And part of that is the fact that, we don't get down on our hands and knees and observe closely because maybe things aren't slowing down as much as they appear. We're drawn to these more charismatic things like butterflies and bumblebees and things like that. But things do slow down. And if we look right now, we can see, what's going on with something like bumblebees. A month ago, I was seeing a lot of male bumblebees and worker bumblebees out. And now I rarely see any of those. I don't think I've seen either a worker or a female or a male bumblebee in the last week. What I see now is what they're called gynns. They're going to be next year's queen bumblebees. And so if you see these big, fat, black and yellow bumblebees, those are going to be queens next year if they make it through the winter. And so part of, what this really is going to focus on is what we can do to help these animals get through the winter. And I just want to make a comment. When I use the word animals, I'm going to be using that in a biological sense. So, a sow bug, a pill bug, I should say. That's an animal. Okay, so.
Okay. Real quick, the pill bug, are those what we used to call roly-polies?
Some people call those roly-polies.
From my childhood.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Sow bug is actually something different.
Oh, okay.
But they look a lot the
Those
same.
bugs are not really bugs in the sense of insect. They're actually crustaceans, aren't they?
Right. So I'm going to use bugs loosely,
Okay.
not in the strict entomological sense. And I may even use the word insect loosely.
Okay.
Because insects have 6 legs and jointed.
Well, you were talking about the queen bees going out looking for a place a couple of weeks ago. I think it's over now. I could walk through the woods and walk through clouds of these flying insects. And could you explain what those are?
Well,
The queen ants is what I'm talking about.
Can you tell me more about what they look like?
A cloud of bugs.
Yeah. So, I mean, there could be a number of things there, right? You could have reproductives out. That happens a lot. So maybe ants.
That's what I think they are. The ants going out looking for a new home.
Right. So, what happens, all the Hymenoptera, which are, wasps, bees, ants, and something called sawflies, all of those have a reproductive cycle, with the exception of the sawflies, where they're social, or the social ones of those. They produce, at the end of their season, they produce a lot of males and females. They all go out. They're on the wing. They're mating between colonies out there, and then they drop. They clip their wings off, and then they're going to crawl around and find a new home.
And let me go back. We were talking a little bit, speaking of the flying insect before. My hummingbird feeder all of a sudden has been just inundated with these yellow jackets, I believe we call them. And has come around in the last 3 weeks, I've noticed.
Yeah, so that's one of the other pollinators I was going to talk about this, this time of year, what's going on. So, wasps are one of our groups of pollinators, not as good as bees are at it. And then, you can break wasps down into what we call social wasps and solitary wasps. So social wasp, there's a group of wasps that are living together, a colony, a nest. So yellow jacket's a perfect example of that. And these are annual cycles. So that nest starts out in the early spring, and it goes through, and sometime into the fall, what happens is it starts to die off. At the end of that cycle, these reproductives are produced, the males and next year's queens. And you're getting to later in the summer, you get to where the maximum colony size occurs. And so there's a lot of mouths to feed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the yellow jackets this time of year seem real pesty a lot of times. You'll be flying around you, and that doesn't really happen much in the spring. So they're out looking for food, basically, is why they're behaving like that. Honeybees, you see a lot of honeybees out right now. And that's because for them, they're not on an annual basis, right? Those colonies will go year after year after year, but they've got to gather enough honey so that they've got food resources to make it through the winter.
Okay.
Especially the wild ones.
Okay.
The agricultural ones, they'll be fed honey or syrup or something like that if they need to get them over the winter.
And do they swarm here? I've never seen a honeybee swarm.
They will swarm, especially the feral ones, meaning the ones that are wild. Normally, for people that are keeping bees, they keep an eye on that. They want to, keep that what would be a swarm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not an apiculturist, so I'm just going to talk generally here. But they try to keep that so that they can have then a second hive off of that.
For those who don't know, and if I'm wrong about this, correct me. A swarm is when one hive kind of gets overpopulated, and then a whole bunch of them fly out and look for a new place to.
That's right.
Live.
And it's the old queen that goes in the swarm for honeybees.
And they were fairly common in Arizona I'd be walking in the desert, and all of a sudden I'd walk into a swarm. But from what I either learned or remember, maybe somebody told me that the swarm is not dangerous, not like a hive. A hive, they protect the hive,
Right.
but they're not interested in protecting the swarm so much. But it is very scary looking, especially when in Arizona they say all bees are Africanized. So,
That's
Yeah.
whole other that Africanized bees. Well, all I know is I'm gonna quit getting too. I don't get really mad, but my hummingbirds and the wasps, the yellow jackets, have a little. The hummingbirds are aggressive alone, just with their own.
Yeah.
But boy, there's little fights that I see out there between them. But I'll just let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go.
And then, our other bees, in Oregon, we've got like 800 bees, 800 different kinds of bees.
Wow.
And you can break those into solitary bees, and the only social bees, for the most part, are bumblebees. There's some other little exceptions to that rule, but it's very few. And so bumblebees, they've got the same kind of thing going as the yellow jacket does. They get larger and larger, et cetera. But the social ones, those bees and wasps, they're solitary ones, solitary bees and solitary wasps, they are, at this time of year, they're going to be overwintering, either in an adult stage or as I don't know if you remember from biology how the insect life cycle goes, but you have an egg, and then you've got certain larval stages that come after that, and then they go and maybe make a cocoon, spin a cocoon around themselves. That's kind of optional on these solitary bees. And then eventually they pupate, which means they're getting ready to turn into an adult.
Okay.
Right? So you can find those either as what they call a prepupa, just before that pupation, or adults, and they'll be in a hollow stem somewhere, waiting to come out next year. And so this is what's going on with these animals at this time of year. Butterflies and moths. We could have adults hiding in bushes somewhere, waiting for another warm, sunny day, so maybe they get an opportunity to mate and lay eggs. But if we step back, and we got to think, what can we do now to help these? There's also something called beneficial insects. And so, pollinators are important, and people focus on pollinators. There's been a lot of, organizations that have developed around, save the pollinators, et cetera. But beneficial insects, these are things like, lady beetles, also known as ladybugs, ground beetles, things that we don't really think about that much. And they're really good in our yards because they've got this job to do. And so if you look at something like a ladybug, when they have larvae out there, their first larval instar is a very active predator of things like aphids. And we don't know what's going on in our yard a lot of times, but these things are taking care of pest control for us. Ground beetles, which is a certain type of beetles, and I maybe add that there's something like 400,000 different kinds of beetles in the world. But ground beetles are one group, and they love eating slugs and snails. And there's something called harvestmen, which looks a lot like a daddy long-legged spider.
Okay.
But a little bit shorter legs. You see them out walking around the grass sometimes. And there's one of those that specializes in crawling up into snail shells and getting them. So you want all these things in your yard because they're helping control things. So you don't have to go pull the pesticide can out.
Well, and even the slugs aren't. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone here a little bit, pay grade. But even some of the slugs can be beneficial, and snails. I mean, people.
Exactly.
Some I don't know about.
Okay, now slugs. Well, let me say something here.
Go, yeah.
Beneficial. What does that mean? Well, that kind of follows that beauty is in the eye of the beholder rule, right? So who defined that as being beneficial? Well, we did, right? Beneficial to us.
Okay.
So we don't consider a slug beneficial because, well, they don't help us. But in terms of the overall food web and decomposition that's going on, the whole ecosystem out there, they have a place in that. They're great, at recycling things and that.
There's no such thing as good animals and bad animals.
Correct. We're the ones that created those terms.
Yes.
And then tiger beetles, another kind of beetle, but I bring it up because they're really interesting. They come out at night unless you scare them. They're really good predators, eat all kinds of things that we don't want, and maybe they'll eat some things that we do want, but that's just the way it works, right?
Well,
Because there's, again, to your point, there's no good and bad. They eat.
collateral damage.
Yeah.
Some of them, I guess.
Yeah, it's up to us whether they're good or bad. They're just doing what
and
they
like
do.
tiger beetles, they're built, they're evolved to be these little hunting machines. There's an Australian tiger beetle that is the world record holder. It's the fastest insect in the world. It can run 8 feet in a second.
Hope we don't encounter one of those.
And you think about what that means.
Well, you wouldn't know it if you did.
Well, I guess not.
That's pretty fast.
So you think about that in terms of, okay, how far across his boot is 8 feet, and then boom.
Yeah.
So we have
Well, listen, I want to let everybody again know, if you have a question, we have the gentleman here to answer your question. So you can text in 541-661-4098. And Dave, I wanted to real quick, you talked about basically this time of year coming up, there's a lot of hibernators also.
Right.
But our climate, we have a lot of microclimates, I guess, all over, Oregon itself, from high desert to, and here we are on the coast. Our climate's pretty mellow. And you talked about a warm day. If we all of a sudden get one unusual warm day, will some of these insects, animals, if you will, come out of hibernation?
No.
Okay.
If they're actually in hibernation, what they call diapause a lot of times, my understanding of what it takes to break that is really these kind of multi-day events. They're also sensitive to things like photoperiods. So if they're close enough to where they're getting any sense of what the light is, they know whether it's a short day out there or not.
Okay.
And so there's a number of factors that play into when they break diapause and come out.
Daylight has a lot to do with a lot of that. I used to keep horses in Alaska, and when the days started getting longer, the horse's body thought, well, spring is here, but it ain't here, and they will be shedding mountains of hair that they still need because it's going to still be cold for a while. But somehow they got it figured out that they make it through that.
Yeah, so we just back up and kind of to the point you're saying, Rick, is some of these various animals that we've talked about here, these beneficials and pollinators, some of those, and mostly the beneficial insects, some of those will be active all year round, especially in our climate because it's so mild. And if you were in a desert or something like that, or up at 5,000 foot elevation somewhere, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
Maybe with some exceptions, but you won't have much that's hanging out.
Before we leave, beneficial, I don't know if we're going to, I have to put in a vote, I guess, from some of my favorite animals, since I'm a kind of an amateur herpetologist, and I see people get all upset when there's a snake in their yard, and that's actually a good thing almost everywhere, but it is a very good thing here. The snakes here in Oregon are garter snakes, that's all there are, and they're extremely beneficial. They're nothing but good. They eat bugs, they eat slugs, they eat all sorts of things that we don't like, not to mention the fact that they're very interesting and beautiful to watch.
I'm a snake and lizard guy, man, so I love them all.
And it's same thing with frogs and toads.
Oh, yeah.
Also very beneficial.
Salamanders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we have those here.
Yeah, we've got a garter snake in our yard. I see every once in a while.
I have a pond, a fish pond, and all through the summer it's full of tadpoles, and I have 2 snakes that are regulars that spend almost the whole summer right at my pond. They know me. They don't run away when they see me or anything. They're kind of my buds, and they help themselves to whatever tadpoles I can, which is an amazing amount, and they get really, really good at catching them. But
Snakes aren't pollinators, however, I don't believe. Are they, Dave?
I think they
far as
probably
I know.
whip
Okay.
the tail on a bush once in a while, and
Okay,
maybe
there you go.
accidentally, and they're not.
There you go. And I want to go on. I know you're the bee expert. You talked about in your presentation that I attended, which was wonderful, by the way, the Oregon Bee Atlas. Did you have something to do with that?
Yeah, so the Master Melitologist certification program is actually associated with the Oregon Bee Atlas.
Okay.
So in order to hit different levels of certification, you study, and then at the same time you're working with the Bee Atlas. The Oregon Bee Atlas is out across the state of Oregon. We've got volunteers that go out and collect bees all throughout the season and register what kind of plant they're on. And then we take them back to our homes and try to identify them as best we can down to either genus or species level on the bee, which can be quite demanding for, an amateur. So you can spend I've spent, more than 4 hours working on trying to figure out one bee to species, and just threw my hands up in the air and said, well.
Xerces. I went on that web. Now that's Xerces, I believe. And I was looking at perusing some of that, and the research there, the people that do that, that's some arduous. I wouldn't call it sexy, like if you're out there looking at blue whales or something, but it's very important to what we do. And that looks like some pretty tough research for people to, and throughout the year they do that in ungodly weather, I'm assuming.
It's really difficult. I can't speak from, my own experience, but just reading on, some of the things they have to do. If you think about a bee that's nesting in the ground, and we'll say a solitary bee, they're not harmful. They're not going to sting you unless you squeeze it between your fingers. They've got a little entrance that's maybe the size of a pencil eraser or less, a little hole in the ground. And that burrow may go down 1 foot, 2 feet, depending on the soil conditions and things like that. And then there's going to be a bunch of little branches off of that where they create cells, and they go and collect pollen. They make a pollen mass in the cell, lay an egg, close that off, and that'll be one bee sometime in the future. And they'll make more cells and more cells. And they might make 1 cell a day on average if you look across all the bees. And so, there's now how do you study that? So and so you look in these books and you see pictures of what these look like underground. Well, what they do is they take a liquid solution that solidifies, plaster of Paris or something, pour it down and let it seep down in there and harden, and then excavate that all out, and then you've got the model of what that looks like. One guy, really famous bee scientist named McNamer, he and another guy created this thing where they actually have you remember the ant nest where you look between two panes of glass?
Oh, had a couple of those.
So he figured out a
Mom didn't like them, but
way to do something similar with ground nesting bees. And actually had to, crawl in through a little space using a red light so they didn't get distracted, and see and observe what's going on. How do you know what is going on in the life cycle of these bees if you can't watch it?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll stick a little ophthalmic scope, those little scopes, I forget the proper name of those things, down there and look at things. So, really tough stuff to do.
Every now and then I'll see something, I don't know, maybe sitting outside and see a little tiny bug that I can barely see, like a flea or a very little spider. And I'm thinking, this animal has a name. Somebody has studied this thing, maybe did a PhD dissertation on this little bug, and there's so damn many of them I'm sure a lot of them really are not classified. Is that right, do you think?
Oh, yeah. I'd forget. So typically, if I can remember correctly, they'll say, okay, we've got somewhere around 1 million described insects, meaning that somebody put them under a microscope, noted all the subtle little differences between this particular insect and a close relative. And so there's some work that goes into that. And so they'll say, we've got, probably 1 million something described insects, but we think there's 5 times or 10 times as many still waiting to be described. And with climate change going on, one of the things people are concerned about is we're going to lose things before we ever knew they were there.
Oh, thank you for that, because doing on the Xerces site, now I might have this wrong, I think I have it right, they named Xerces after a blue butterfly, I think, that is now extinct.
Right, yeah.
Did I have that correct?
Yeah, so that's the Xerces blue butterfly.
Which look beautiful.
And blues are pretty common. We've got, Fender's blue around in Oregon and various others. But that one, went extinct due to development activities on in San Francisco, North Peninsula area.
Oh, well, there's plenty of development there. That's
yeah. So that 50 years ago, a little over 50 years ago, is the last time it was seen flying.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. And so these extinctions, they go on there's always been extinctions. What's important is what the rate of extinction is, because now we've got this really bumped up rate of extinction. And, these things are going on. We don't know they're going on.
Yeah. And again, at your presentation, we talked a little bit about, I think as we humans, we're too quick. If something bugs them, they're going to kill it. They want to kill it right away. And you talked a little bit about the bug zappers, things that we do. Those bug zappers.
Those are horrible.
Well, I wasn't really aware until you, like you said, it really doesn't kill enough of the bad, let's say mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes are not attracted to light.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
And not a good thing to do for people that really want a garden or to help the pollinators along.
That's right. So, I don't remember the exact numbers, but, the people, they did a study and they put these zappers out, and it was some tiny fraction of 1% of the kill was actually mosquitoes.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these other, harmless and or beneficial kind of things out there.
Moths, I guess.
Moths, exactly.
Okay.
Which, could be helping us out.
In Alaska, we had, I guess they're everywhere, that there's a lot of mosquitoes we could buy. This gadget, I guess you'd call it, that burns a propane flame, which creates carbon monoxide, which is what attracts the mosquitoes. And then there would be a fan creating a negative pressure, and it would suck all the mosquitoes into a little bag. And at the end of a period of time, you had a huge bag full of mosquitoes. Didn't do a damn thing for the population. You still couldn't sit outside. Yeah. But it killed a bunch of them.
Yeah. So...
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so before, moving on to some of the things that we can actually go out and do, I just want to say, when we look across this spectrum of beneficial insects, pollinators, et cetera, just a couple of other things that I did not mention is, we get more from them besides ecosystem balance in our yards. We get, decomposition services, really important. So flies and certain millipedes and different things, they're earthworms. They're decomposing things all the time. And then the food web. 95% of terrestrial birds rely on insect larvae or insects at some stage of their lifetime.
Oh.
And, you probably know that bird populations have declined. I think the bird counts... I shouldn't start this because I can't pull out the number, but over the last 50 years, Audubon, I think bird counts are down around 30% or something like that.
I've heard
over
some pretty
50
ugly
years.
numbers.
And,
Yeah.
the grass bird land type birds, the seed eaters, they've been fairly stable in the counts. And it's the insectivores,
Okay.
or that rely on insects at some stage that are getting hammered. So, there's also this food web component. So it's, critical to have these lower level animals at kind of the base of the food webs in many cases.
And so here we are, come fall, and the beautiful colors. And where I came from, it was almost a Leave It to Beaver suburban green lawn. When the leaves fall, rake those babies up and get rid of them. I think you were talking about at one time. Is it just better to try to leave the leaves there and not rake them up? Or don't they provide a lot of sustenance and living conditions, if you will, for a lot of creatures that we need?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
If I can just delay a
Please.
little bit, because that is actually the next kind of
Okay.
thing I want to get into.
Okay.
But I want to just emphasize that. What can we do to help? Well,
Yes.
It's complicated. It is really complicated. I believe you've gotten a little bit of flavor for that, because there's a hell of a lot more going on than, what I've talked about. So, we can have these animals at any life stage. What do we do? Well, luckily there's, organizations, Xerces Society is one, and there's others that are, they've got teams of people that have been working for years. Xerces has been around 50 years, working and putting together campaigns to teach people what it is they can do to help out. And one of those, we've had a lot of focus on wildlife-friendly gardening in the last few years, and that usually revolves around, put in the right flowers. If you pay attention, a lot of it's about, this kind of flower, that kind of flower. Make sure they're there from spring until fall, and that's all good. But that's only one piece of what it takes to support an entire life cycle of insects. And so we, as adults and larvae both need food. Things like butterflies and moths, we know they're very specific in terms of larval food for their caterpillars. They need sites where they can, build a nest and, lay eggs if that's what they do, because not everybody builds a nest. Butterflies, they just lay eggs on the back of a leaf and fly away. A lot less work that way. They just, drop off the eggs and say good luck and, head on next. And then you've got others that are really guarding their brood, so different levels of parental influence that way. And butterflies and moths, they need a place to pupate. Those pretty chrysalis that you see for like a monarch butterfly,
Yeah.
They've got to hang somewhere.
Yeah.
They need a place for that. And they need sheltering sites because they've got to evade predators. I said that they're part of the food web, but they don't really want to be part of the food web necessarily. And so they're going to, want to try to hide somewhere. And this time of year, we've got leaves. So you brought that up. And one of the campaigns that the Xerces Society has is called Leave the Leaves. And, the benefits to doing that, first of all, leaves are a good source of organic material for your yard. And, they make a really nice mulch. Bumblebees will overwinter. Some species of bumblebee that will overwinter in leaves. They'll burrow themselves in the leaves and just stay there. Around here, it's so warm. In fact, some bumblebees don't go into true hibernation. But nonetheless, as a general statement, they use that. And then these ground beetles that I talked about that are such voracious predators that are going after slugs and snails and things, they use that leaf litter that's on the ground. And so, we've got various beetle larvae that are in there, something called springtails that are little tiny little animals that jump, I forget how, like 100 times their size, because they've got a spring-loaded tail, basically. Mites and pill bugs, these things are doing decomposition for us. And there was a study done in Maryland, a 2-year study, where they looked at the impact of leaf removal. And what they found is if you had a site where you took the leaves off, this is a patch of ground, basically, a 1 square yard patch of ground. You take the leaves off one square and leave them on the other. They're side by side, so it's a good comparison. They did this across multiple suburban yards, and then the next spring, and it may have started in the end of winter or something, but they put something called an emergence trap up on top, and they collect every insect that comes out of that and identify it. And it's painstaking work. But what they found is that compared to a place where you left leaves and then looking at one where you didn't, the emergence of moths and butterflies was down about 50%. Beetles were down 25%. Something called ichneumoniid wasps, they're kind of a parasitic wasp that are beneficial in controlling things. They were down, over 50%. And then spiders down like by 67%. Now, some people listening might say, oh, good.
Well,
I don't like spiders. I'm going to get rid of all my leaves. But got to bear in mind, spiders have got a really important role.
Huge.
In the
They have a huge. The big role right now is building a web between any place I can walk in my yard. I can't. It's a good thing I can maintain control, because I often have one crawling on my chest because I've walked into the middle of its web. But
yeah. So well, go ahead.
No. As a kid, I was pretty big arachnophobe, if you want to say it, but I've learned to really love them, and their webs are beautiful. And I know, Ray, it's I hope there's never a camera when I walk into a web, because that's pretty embarrassing. But they are hugely beneficial.
Right. So have you seen jumping spiders? You know what that are?
I do.
There's a big hobby of keeping them as pets.
So these are the small little furry ones, right?
Yeah.
They're almost iridescent.
Yeah, they can be. Yeah, and
yes.
And I love jumping spiders.
I do too.
We had them in Austin, and you go. One was on top of the table one time, and I'm sitting there looking at it, and it's looking at me, waving its little, they call them pedipalps,
yes,
little arms.
Yes.
Waving those arms at me, and then I walked over to one side a little ways, and he went and turned his little body around and followed me.
Pretty observant.
It's like it was trying to.
You cannot believe that they're not intelligent.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you, where I've seen them kept as pets, they have like a little glass terrarium type thing, but they don't. They take them out and they allow them to walk around and everything, and they can put them back. And I'm always excited when I see a jumping spider on my deck.
So anyway, going back to this campaign, leave the leaves, but you don't do this in a vacuum, and use common sense. So what we're not saying, don't block your drains. If they're on a sidewalk or something where they get slippery when they get wet, don't have them there. And certainly if you've got any plants that are diseased, that, say you've had some kind of a disease outbreak on a tree or shrub or something like that, well, those leaves, this is just good gardening. You want to rake those up, put them in a bag, and put them in the trash is what you want to do. So, spread that disease. Those pathogens.
So are you talking about a suburban lawn where you would leave the leaves and that doesn't harm the grass over the winter?
Well, okay, so if you look at an area like grass, the suggestion would be to leave a light layer. Okay.
Otherwise, it's just going to cut all the light out and kill the grass.
but you leave a light layer there. And if it's under a tree where those leaves, that's going to be happening already. If it's under a tree. It'll get some light, obviously, in the wintertime when the leaves drop if it's deciduous. But so light on a lawn, but look at, say, a hedge or bushes that you have in a bed. There you can go with a little bit heavier layer, and that would be a place to rake leaves into. Let's say you've got an area in the back of the house that people aren't seeing from the street or something like that. You can be creative.
Yeah.
Just use your common sense when you're doing it.
Well, they're natural mulch.
Oh yeah, they're great mulch. Yeah.
Okay, because I remember I worked part-time for Lowe's after I retired and during the spring, and I can't, my God, the amount of mulch and bark that came in, pallets upon pallets that were loading it. And I kind of wondered at times I wonder if they just left the leaves that are falling from their trees on a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly don't shred the leaves. I can't honestly imagine that somebody would think that it'd be a good idea to rake them up, shred them, and then put them back where they are.
Oh,
but
I see.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Doesn't that
it's going to
get them to decompose quicker, or if you're putting them in compost?
It will, but then what about things that are, say a moth cocoon that's wrapped up in one of those leaves? Because they'll do that. Some of the silk moths will actually, bind those leaves together, and you won't see them. And they can be fairly large cocoons on some of those things. And ground beetles can get, pretty large. So, you're going to be killing some stuff if you do that. Now, if you do it in the spring, though, right, the following spring, because what we're talking about is preparing for overwintering here.
Okay.
And so the study that was done, it was looking at emergence in the springtime. So after that, you can do whatever you want with the leaves. It's the smartest thing to do would be somehow retain them for mulch, et cetera. And at that time it might make sense to shred them if they're large leaves.
Yeah, I used to shred them, but I don't anymore because I didn't have a border on my driveway. Now I have a block wall that's about a foot high, and I can just walk along and blow the leaves over that, and eventually I'm building up more soil behind that wall.
Right.
So
and
I guess I'm giving little bugs a ride with the blower, but I don't think
that's probably not her.
Upsetting the population too much.
And sometimes people are reluctant to leave leaves behind in places because they're worried about, what are the neighbors going to think, et cetera. And so one suggestion there is just signage. And you can go to the Xerces site, and I'm sure you can go to other sites, but it's just I'm most familiar with that since I'm ambassador for them. And, you can purchase a sign, part of that money goes to them, and it'll, it's got a nice picture, nice graphic, leave the leaves on there. And, you put that out in your yard, and it kind of explains a little bit about what you're doing. It's just like, my yard, it gets a little, shall we say, unkempt because I'll let things grow on the lawn over the summer and spring. I'll let the flowers, other people call them weeds, but they're flowers, grow. And so, but I've got a sign out front that says, pollinator habitat. So, people maybe get a clue about why that stuff is there.
And I think that old adage about, I go back to the leave it to beaver days, whatever you want to call it, of the nice manicured, beautiful green, deep green lawn, especially where I came from, Central California. Drought conditions are just becoming terrible. We were always having water issues, and they were trying to tell people to probably take the lawns out and go to another more natural, whatever you want to call it.
That you don't have to mess with and cut all the time.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
But and then of course we get into the pesticide thing, putting whatever not mulch. I'm trying to think of the stuff that supposedly makes the grass grow. I can't think of the word, but a lot of that stuff had some harmful chemicals in it.
Yeah, you're talking about the synthetic fertilizers that
kind of
people
stuff.
are adding. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up lawns. I wasn't really planning to talk about that, but I can't resist saying a few words. So lawns. Yeah, this is this thing that we inherited from our colonial ancestry, right? That's what that was the right thing to do because that's what they did over in England and various places. But we have 40 to 50 million acres of lawn in this country. That's a state that's equivalent of the state of, say, roughly North Dakota.
Oh, wow.
Right? And it's unproductive.
It's for beauty.
Yeah.
When I sold my house on Long Island, I swore that I would never have a lawn again as long as I live. I used to spend a good part of the year fertilizing and cutting and raking and doing all sorts of things, and then the fertilizer just made the grass grow, so then I had to spend a lot more time cutting, and it was just insane. I said, I'll never do this again, and I haven't had a lawn since. I have parts of my land that I cleared. It was just all overgrown with berry bushes and stuff, and now it sits there, no lawn. I refuse to put. I'm not sure what to do with it. I think I'll plant an orchard or something there.
And part of you're talking about, how about these huge sod farms that's all they have?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen truckload, when they start to build a new neighborhood, it happened down in where I came from, Sacramento area. God, these trucks pull in with just these big rolls of nice, beautiful green sod. And is there really a benefit to that other than the beauty, whatever you want to call it?
Well, it's a benefit to them.
Well,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Right.
The guys that are growing it. For me personally, I'd say no, zero.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if that's part of, it's a free country. If that's
Sure.
part of what, you think makes a beautiful yard, then there's a benefit there. But it's just nice to keep in mind the fact that we have lost so much what could be good habitat to this kind of thing. Why not? I gave a talk up in Corvallis, I guess it was, and talked about lawns as one of the things in there. And after that talk, I got a little note from one of the people that was there and says she finally convinced her husband to take out half of the lawn.
Yeah.
After he saw the presentation, they both watched it. And so it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Get rid of 10%, get rid of 25%, and put in some native plants or something like that.
That was a nice thing about Tucson. You had native yards, or they were groomed and all that type of thing. But grass wasn't very common. It was all the native
natural
cactus.
desert landscape. I'm assuming.
Right.
And the other thing they were doing in my neighborhood, which I didn't like, they were taking out the lawns and putting in fake lawns, green. I'm not quite sure that's going to be a benefit to anybody.
What's that going to look like in a few years? Huh?
Well, and you know what the weird part was? We were having water shortages. The people that put in the fake lawns kept their sprinklers going.
That's insane.
Anyway, that is insane. It was a little bit of an anomaly, but yeah, that was crazy. And I'm also glad, Dave, you talked about weeds and wildflowers. Sometimes I'll go by and say, oh man, look at God, that's all the wildflowers in somebody. There are a bunch of weeds, but they're beautiful. And I think they help the pollinators along because
they absolutely.
what they're going to.
There's some weedy species. One's called a bird's foot trefoil, a nice little yellow bloom. It's related to like vetches and clover and that. Another one called self-heal. You probably heard of self-heal, little purple flowers. And clover, white clover, all those things considered weedy in a lawn. But if you go to my yard and I've got just a small yard, but if you go to that front in, say, June, just bumblebees everywhere.
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so, hey, they have a purpose. They have a role. Now, I want to just mention a couple more things about Leave the Leaves.
Oh, yes.
Or one thing, really, is fire safety. If you live in a high-risk area, obviously follow the local guidance.
Okay.
So, don't pile a bunch of leaves against the side of your house. Remember, it said use common sense. So, always keep that in mind. Now, another campaign that Xerces has is called Save the Stems. And this is another one that's fairly important when it comes to things like nest sites for native bees and solitary wasps. So if you look at plants, some of them, if you go and cut the stem, you'll see that it's got a soft center to it. Okay, they call it pithy or a soft center. And that's soft enough that certain of our bees can go and dig and excavate down there, and then they will go and use that to lay their eggs in that. I'm not, going to go through the whole process of what it takes to build these cells, but and you could maybe, depending on how long that stem is, you could have 10 or 15 bees that come out of that thing the next year.
Wow.
And again, I not again, but I want to emphasize something here. A lot of people look at something like a yellow jacket and say bees, and they're not bees, they're wasps. And they say, they attacked me. And the only bees that attack are social bees or social wasps, because they have got a colony and they protect their babies. And so they've evolved to actually have toxins in their sting that are highly effective on mammals like us, because mammals are the things that, like skunks, will go and find a bumblebee nest in the ground and scarf that thing down because it's got a lot of protein and fat in it.
Oh, wow.
And so they attack. So it's these social ones that live in groups, solitaries, and 90% of our bees are solitary bees. Those things do not bother you. And, the same with the solitary wasp. Now, so I just want to make that point that don't confuse bees and wasps, and recognize the fact that it's a very small percentage of bees that will actually chase you around. And for the most part, that's only if you stumble on a bumblebee nest or a yellow jacket nest.
Well, and again, yellow jackets, are they pollinators themselves?
They are. They're not as effective. I mean, the adults will go and use nectar.
Okay.
Bees are really effective pollinators because they're gathering the pollen to feed their young.
The yellow jackets are pretty much carnivores, right?
Exactly. Yeah, almost all wasps are, wasps kind of break down into two categories. They're either carnivores or parasitic wasps. Okay. And then there's, one weird little group of wasps called pollen wasps that are kind of like vegetarian wasps, like bees are. But yeah. So save the stem. So we want to create these nest sites for these bees that actually are stem nesters. It's something like 30% of the bees or something like that are stem nesters. And the idea here, just in brief, because I'm going to talk about some resources and you can find out more, but just in brief, what you're doing is at the end of this time of year, at the end of the bloom season, instead of cutting the flowering stems back, you leave the flowers on. In the spring, you cut them to certain heights, and there's a resource that talks about that. Remember things like rock walls, rock piles, branches, and things that you leave out in your yard. This creates a really great little habitat for these various kinds of insects that we're talking about. And sometimes chaos is a good thing. And, I've got a good bit of chaos in my yard.
That was my gardening style.
Yeah, I mean, my wife tells me anyway, it's chaotic. But, in all seriousness, I don't have pest problems, and I don't use insecticides. I mean, everything's under control.
Wow.
So, there's something to this.
We do a lot of pretty harmful stuff, don't we, in our want to make it our nice green manicured lawns and stuff.
Yeah. So, just, I guess briefly, some resources I'd just like to put this out there. So if you go to Xerces.org, Xerces.org, go to the home page, you will see a little slideshow. Various topics. One of them is leave the leaves, and we've got to save the stems. That you can get more information there. Just click on the slide.
And I did that, and I want to tell everybody, even for a non-garden guy, it was pretty interesting and pretty eye-opening. Yes.
Yeah, and then there's a tab at the top of the page called Resources, and you can go there and see different things, learn about invertebrates, etc. And there's just a lot of other information there if you want it.
Yeah. Well, we are getting down to the nitty-gritty here, but I also want... Now, Dave, you are a member also of our local garden club.
Right.
And there's more resources for people and...
Yeah, so the Brookings Harbor Garden Club you can find on Facebook, and they're always looking for people that might be interested to be members. You can go to one of the meetings and potentially sign up for that. There's going to be a Harvest Festival event, I think October 11th is Saturday, coming up here. That'll be at the Botanical Garden down there near where 101 crosses the river there.
Yeah.
On the corner. Can't think of the street coming
Park,
out there.
Right
By Azalea Park.
Yeah.
So that's going to be going on October 11th, and again, you could stop by there and find out more. And I'll have a Xerces table set up there.
Oh, great. So mark that down, October 11th. Roughly what time it start?
I think 10 o'clock.
Okay.
10 to 2 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're down to just a couple minutes. Dave, anything else you wanted to excitedly get out before we're out of time? I know you had a whole list, and I had more stuff to ask, but we're almost out of time.
Well, I just throw out one more resource. There's something called Homegrown National Park by a guy named Doug Tallamy. He's an entomologist. And if you can Google Homegrown National Park, or you can go to homegrownnationalpark.org, no hyphens or anything like that. And, his idea is that if enough people create habitat in their own yard, it can be the equivalent amount of acreage as one of our national parks.
Wow. So that's great. Well, okay, I'd like to thank you again, Dave. And even, like I said, for a non-gardening guy like me, I figured out or found out a lot of stuff that I will, even in my little tiny gardening thing, I'll do differently. But it's very important stuff. Again, we didn't even touch on the food plants that we have that we need the pollinators for. God, I walked the blackberry path right there by the Smith River a lot, and what a joy that is. You just pick up for free all of the beautiful blackberries that are there. All the good ones are way back because I can't get, but I know there's a way to. The bears do it.
The bears will open up the paths to those.
Oh, and we almost forgot to mention it's Fat Bear Week. What is it?
Yes.
Fat Bear. Okay.
Yeah.
I just found out. Okay, folks, we're down to the last 30. Thank you again, Dave Kollen. Talk about gardening, pollinators, and all of that good stuff. And you all have been listening to KCIW LP 100.7 FM in beautiful Brookings, Oregon.
And thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.